Some nights you feel the world holding its breath like it knows something you don't. Ethan Carter felt it that night, standing alone at a bus stop in Hawthorne, Ohio, but he didn't listen. Ethan was 30, a desk jockey at a small insurance firm, the kind of guy who liked routine, coffee at 7, bus at 6, home by 7. But tonight, his boss had kept him late, drowning in spreadsheets, and he'd missed his usual 11:30 bus. Now, just past midnight, he stood under a flickering street lamp, the air cold and damp, fog curling around the edges of the empty street. His phone was dead, his jacket too thin, and the only thing keeping him company was the hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Hawthorne was a quiet town, the kind where everyone knew your name and your business. Ethan liked it that way, even if he kept to himself. He'd grown up here, raised by his mom after his dad left, and he knew every street, every shortcut. But he also knew the stories, the ones whispered at the diner or told around campfires. Stories about the midnight bus, the one that ran when no one else did. Chuyin Midnight. The old-timers called it, their voices low, like saying it too loud might summon something. Ethan never bought into that stuff. Ghosts, curses, things that go bump in the night, they were for kids, not grown men with bills to pay. Still, as he waited, the fog thickening, he couldn't shake a prickle on his neck, like someone was watching. The bus stop was just a rusty sign and a bench. No shelter, no lights except that flickering lamp. He checked his watch. 12:02. The bus was late, or maybe it wasn't coming. Just as he turned to walk home, 3 miles in the cold, he heard it. A low rumble like thunder rolling slow. Headlights cut through the fog, dim and yellow, and an old bus groaned to a stop. It was ancient, paint peeling, windows smudged, no logo or route number. Just a bus, but it felt wrong, like it didn't belong here. Ethan hesitated, his breath puffing in the air. The door creaked open, folding slow, and a figure sat in the driver's seat. Hunched in a dark coat, face hidden by a hood. No hello, no nod, just a gloved hand pointing to the fare box. Ethan fumbled in his pocket, dropping a handful of quarters into the slot. They clinked, loud in the silence, but the driver didn't move, didn't take them. Instead, a voice rasped, low and dry, like leaves on pavement. Price comes later. Ethan froze, the words sinking into him. What? He asked, but the driver just pointed to the seats, silent. The door hissed shut and the bus lurched forward, nearly knocking Ethan off his feet. He grabbed a pole, steadying himself, and looked around. The bus was almost empty, just a handful of passengers scattered toward the back. 5, maybe 6, their faces pale, eyes fixed on him, unblinking. A woman in a gray scarf. An old man with a cane, a young guy in a hoodie. They didn't look right, their skin too white, their stares too heavy. "Hey!" Ethan said, his voice shaky, trying to break the tension. "You guys know where this bus is headed?" No one answered. The woman's lips twitched like she wanted to speak, but her eyes stayed locked on him, dark and hollow. Ethan's stomach twisted. He slid into a seat near the front, close to the door, his hands gripping his bag. The bus smelled of damp metal and something sour, like old clothes left in the rain. The engine growled, louder than it should have, and the road outside the windows was wrong, too dark, too narrow, no streetlights, no houses. Ethan leaned toward the window, squinting through the fog. This wasn't Main Street, wasn't any street he knew. The bus was moving fast, trees blurring past, their branches clawing at the glass. He turned to the driver, his voice louder now. "Where are we going? This isn't the route." The driver didn't answer, just kept driving, the hood hiding his face. Ethan's heart picked up, a steady thump in his chest. He stood, ready to demand a stop, when the old man at the back spoke, his voice thin, like paper tearing. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Ethan spun, meeting the man's eyes, black, no whites, just pools of nothing. The woman in the scarf nodded, her fingers twisting the fabric, and the young guy in the hoodie leaned forward, whispering, "What did you do?" Ethan's mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, but his voice cracked. The bus hit a bump, jolting him, and the lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the passengers' faces. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared, their words echoing in his head. "What did you do?" He sank back into his seat, his hands shaking, trying to remember the stories about the midnight bus. Something about passengers who weren't alive, a driver who wasn't human. He'd laughed it off back then, but now, with the fog pressing in and those eyes on him, it didn't feel funny. The bus slowed, the brakes squealing, and Ethan looked out. No town, no lights, just a dirt road stretching into the dark, fog so thick it swallowed the world. The driver turned, just enough for Ethan to see a sliver of his face, or where a face should have been. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank stretch of skin, smooth as wax. Ethan's breath caught, his legs heavy, like they were glued to the floor. The woman in the scarf stood, slow and deliberate, and shuffled toward him, her shoes scraping the aisle. She stopped inches away, her head tilting, and whispered again, "What did you do?" Ethan's eyes darted to the door, the windows, the driver, but there was no way out. The bus was moving again, faster now, and the passengers' stares burned into him like they could see every secret he'd ever buried. And somewhere, deep in his mind, a memory stirred, something he'd locked away. Something from 10 years ago on a rainy night just like this. Ethan's heart pounded, the woman's words, "What did you do?" ringing in his ears like a bell that wouldn't stop. The midnight bus groaned through the fog, its engine a low growl, carrying him deeper into a night that felt alive, hungry. The passengers' eyes, cold and unblinking, pinned him to his seat, their pale faces glowing faintly under the flickering lights. This wasn't just a bus. It was a cage, and Ethan was starting to think he'd never get out. He gripped the edge of his seat, the plastic cracked and sticky under his fingers. The air was heavy, thick with that sour smell, like something rotting just out of sight. The woman in the gray scarf stood too close, her head tilted, her lips twitching like she was chewing on words she couldn't spit out. Ethan leaned away, his back pressed against the window, the glass cold as ice. Outside, there was nothing, no lights, no road signs, just trees twisting in the fog, their branches like fingers reaching for the bus. "Sit down," he said, his voice sharper than he meant, trying to sound brave. The woman didn't move, just stared, her eyes black pools that seemed to pull him in. The old man with the cane spoke next, his voice creaking like a rusty hinge. "I was driving home," he said, "when the truck came out of nowhere. Glass in my lungs, blood on the wheel. They said I didn't suffer." He paused, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile. They lied. Ethan's stomach churned. He wanted to look away, but the young guy in the hoodie leaned forward, his hands folded, his face too pale, like he'd been drained dry. "I was 16, he said, voice flat. "Took my dad's car, thought I was cool. Bridge was icy. Water was cold. They never found me." His eyes locked on Ethan's, sharp and accusing. "What did you do?" "Stop it," Ethan snapped, standing, his bag sliding to the floor. "I didn't do anything. I just want to go home." But the words felt hollow, like he was trying to convince himself. The bus hit a bump, throwing him back into his seat, the lights flickering again, longer this time. In the dark, the passengers' faces seemed to shift, their mouths stretching, eyes sinking deeper. Ethan's hands shook as he fumbled for his phone, hoping for a signal, a way out. The screen lit up, but it was wrong, just static, gray and buzzing, and the clock was frozen at 12 o'clock. The woman in the scarf sat across from him now, her movements slow, like a puppet on strings. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled ticket, yellowed with age. She slid it across the seat, her fingers brushing Ethan's, cold as frost. He flinched, grabbing the ticket. It wasn't like the one he'd bought, machine-printed, clean. This one was handwritten, ink smudged, and it had his name. Ethan Carter, born April 3rd, 1995. No destination, no time, just his name and a faint stain, like blood. "What is this?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely there. The woman didn't answer, just pointed to the driver. Ethan looked up, his throat tight. The driver hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since that raspy price comes later. The hood still hid his face, but now Ethan could hear something, a low, steady hiss like air leaking from a tire coming from the driver's seat. He stood again, gripping the pole, and shouted, "Hey, stop the bus. I want off." The hiss grew louder, sharp enough to hurt, and the driver turned just a fraction. Ethan caught a glimpse, not a face, but a void, smooth and blank like a mask made of nothing. His legs buckled, and he dropped back into his seat, the ticket crumpling in his fist. The bus sped up, the engine roaring, and the windows changed. They weren't showing trees anymore. Ethan stared, his breath catching as the glass flickered like an old TV showing a river, dark and red, bubbling under a moonless sky. Then a forest, flames licking the trees, smoke curling like ghosts. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out, but the voices kept coming. A new one now, a girl, maybe 20, her hair wet, dripping onto the floor. "I was walking home," she said, her voice soft, broken. He didn't stop, hit me and kept going. I felt my bones break, felt the cold. They buried me in a box. She leaned closer, water pooling at her feet, and whispered, "What did you do?" Ethan's mind snapped to a night 10 years ago when he was 20, dumb and scared. A rainy road, his old Chevy, a car in front of him swerving. He clipped it, just a tap, but the other car spun, hit a pole. He saw the driver, a man, slumped over the wheel, blood on his face. Ethan panicked, drove off, told himself it wasn't his fault, that the guy was fine. He never checked, never looked back. But now that memory burned sharp and raw like it was happening again. "I didn't mean it," he muttered, not sure who he was talking to. The passengers didn't blink, didn't move. Just watched, their whispers growing louder, overlapping, a chorus of "What did you do?" The bus slowed, the brakes screeching, and Ethan looked out. A sign loomed in the fog, rusted and crooked. "No exit." The door hissed open, and a figure stood outside, tall and thin, its shape wrong, like it was made of shadows. It didn't move, just waited, its head tilted like it was listening. Ethan's hands shook as he shoved the ticket into his pocket. The driver's hiss filled the air, vibrating in his chest. And then words came, clear and cold. "Tell the truth or pay the price." Ethan's eyes darted to the door, to the figure outside, to the passengers' hollow stares. He wasn't just on a bus anymore. He was on trial, and the night was far from over. Ethan's hands shook as he shoved the crumpled ticket into his pocket, the driver's words, "Tell the truth or pay the price," burning in his mind like a brand. The midnight bus roared through the fog, its engine a living thing, hungry and angry, pulling him deeper into a night that wasn't just dark but wrong. The passengers' whispers had stopped, but their eyes stayed on him, hollow and accusing, like they could see the memory he'd buried. A rainy night, a car crash, a choice to run. Outside, the tall, shadowy figure stood motionless at the empty stop, its head tilted, watching as the bus rolled past. Ethan wasn't sure what scared him more, the thing out there, or the truth it seemed to know. He sank lower in his seat, the plastic creaking, the air thick with that sour rot smell. The bus was cold, too cold, his breath fogging in front of him even though the heater hissed like a snake. The windows flickered again, no longer showing trees or fog but something else. A graveyard, headstones jagged and black, each one carved with his name. Ethan blinked hard, hoping it was his mind playing tricks. But the image stayed, sharp and real, until it shifted to a road, slick with rain. A car crumpled against a pole, blood dripping down the windshield. His car crash 10 years ago, playing like a movie he couldn't turn off. "Stop it," he whispered, pressing his hands to his face. But the bus didn't care. The lights buzzed, flickering faster, and the passengers stirred, their pale faces twisting, mouths stretching into grins that weren't human. The old man with the cane stood, his joints cracking, and pointed at Ethan. "You ran," he said, voice like gravel. "Left him to bleed." The woman in the scarf nodded, her fingers clawing at her throat, and the young guy in the hoodie laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "He knows," they said together, their voices blending into a hum that shook Ethan's bones. "Who knows?" Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. He stood, stumbling toward the driver, gripping the pole to keep from falling. "What do you want from me?" The driver didn't answer, just kept driving, the blank void of his face hidden under the hood. The hiss was louder now, not just sound but a pressure, squeezing Ethan's skull, whispering one word over and over, "Truth." He pounded on the fare box, his fists aching, but it didn't budge, didn't break, just sat there, mocking him. Ethan turned, desperate, and tried the door again, yanking the handle with all his strength. It wouldn't move, the metal hot under his hands like it was alive. He kicked it, swore, and spun back to the passengers. "Leave me alone," he yelled. But they didn't flinch, just stared. Their eyes blacker now, like holes cut into the night. The girl with wet hair spoke again, her voice soft, dripping like water. "You can't run forever," she said. "He's coming." The bus lurched, throwing Ethan to the floor, his knees slamming against the gritty aisle. The lights went out, plunging everything into darkness. And for a moment, all he heard was his own breathing, fast and shallow. Then the engine growled and the lights flickered back, dimmer, casting long shadows. The door hissed open, and Ethan's heart stopped. The tall figure from the stop was climbing aboard, its movements slow, deliberate, like a spider stalking prey. It was thin, too thin, its limbs long and bent, wrapped in a ragged coat that seemed to move, like it was made of smoke. Its face, no eyes, no mouth, just a pale stretch of skin, tilted toward Ethan, and he felt it see him, deep inside, where his secrets lived. Ethan scrambled back, his hands slipping on the floor, his bag forgotten. The figure didn't speak, but the air grew heavier, the hiss now a roar in his head, forming words. "Tell the truth," the passengers chanted, low and steady. "He knows, he knows." Their voices rising, filling the bus like a storm. Ethan's mind flashed to that night again. The rain, the crash. The man slumped over, blood mixing with water. He'd told himself it was nothing, that the guy was fine, but he'd never checked, never faced it. Now it was here, riding with him, demanding its due. The figure stepped closer, its coat brushing the seats, leaving a trail of ash. Ethan's chest tightened, his lungs burning, like the air was turning to poison. He crawled toward the back, past the passengers, their hands reaching for him, cold fingers grazing his jacket. "I didn't mean it," he gasped, tears stinging his eyes. It was an accident. But the figure didn't stop, and the passengers' chants grew louder, their faces blurring, becoming one face. His own, twisted, screaming back at him. The bus sped up, the windows shaking, showing new images now. A hospital room, a man in a bed, bandaged, alive but broken. The man Ethan hit. The figure loomed over him, its blank face inches away, and Ethan felt something snap inside, like a thread breaking. He screamed, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left him." The words tore out of him, raw and jagged. But the figure didn't move, didn't blink, just tilted its head, like it was weighing his soul. Then the bus stopped, so sudden Ethan slammed into a seat, pain shooting through his shoulder. The door was still open, the fog outside thick, swallowing the world. The figure stepped back, its coat dissolving into the air, and the passengers fell silent, their eyes still on him. The driver's hiss came again, softer now, almost a sigh, not enough. Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd said the truth, hadn't he? But the figure was gone, the door wide open, and outside, the fog seemed to pulse, like it was waiting for him to run or fall. Ethan's scream still echoed in his head, his confession, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left him," hanging in the air like smoke. But the midnight bus didn't stop, didn't care. Its engine growled, low and mean, as it sat at the empty stop, fog curling through the open door like a hand reaching inside. The driver's words, "Not enough," burned colder than the air, and the passenger's eyes, black and unblinking, stayed locked on him. Ethan's shoulder throbbed from hitting the seat, his hands trembling as he clutched the pole, the crumpled ticket in his pocket feeling heavier, like it was pulling him down. He told the truth, hadn't he? So why was the bus still here? And why did the fog outside feel alive? Waiting? The tall figure, the one Ethan now thought of as the collector, was gone. Its smoky coat dissolved into the night, but its presence lingered, a weight in the air, like the bus itself was watching him, judging him. The passengers hadn't moved, their pale faces twisted, mouths half open, like they were stuck in a scream they couldn't finish. The woman in the scarf leaned closer, her breath a faint wheeze, and whispered, "The price isn't words." Ethan's stomach dropped. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but his throat was tight, his voice gone, like the bus had stolen it. The driver turned slow, the blank void of its face catching the dim light, smooth and wrong, like a canvas with no paint. The hiss came again, sharper now, cutting through Ethan's skull, forming words that weren't words but thoughts, heavy and final. Pay the price or stay forever. Ethan's eyes darted to the open door, the fog pulsing outside, thick and gray, hiding whatever waited beyond. He could run maybe, but where? This wasn't Hawthorne anymore. This wasn't even the world he knew. The old man with the cane stood, his shadow stretching too long, and spoke, his voice like nails on wood. "I paid with my blood," he said, pulling back his sleeve to show a gash, deep and black, still dripping, though he didn't bleed. The young guy in the hoodie laughed, sharp and jagged, and lifted his shirt, revealing a hole where his heart should have been, edges charred like it was burned out. "We all pay," he said, his eyes glinting. "Your turn." Ethan backed away, his boots slipping on the aisle, his heart hammering so hard it hurt. "I said I was sorry," he gasped, but the words sounded weak, like they didn't matter. The girl with wet hair stood now, water pooling at her feet, her voice soft, almost sad. "You left him to die," she said. "A life for a life." She pointed to the driver. And Ethan saw it, a knife, old and rusted, lying on the fare box, its blade stained dark, like it had tasted blood before. The bus lurched forward, the door still open, fog spilling inside, cold and damp against Ethan's skin. The windows flickered, showing that rainy night again, his Chevy, the other car spinning, the man's face, bloodied, pleading. But now the man looked up, straight at Ethan, his eyes black, his mouth forming one word: "You?" Ethan's knees buckled and he grabbed the seat, his fingers digging into the plastic. "I didn't mean it," he whispered, tears burning his eyes. "I was scared." The driver's hiss grew louder, a scream in his mind, and the passengers chanted, their voices rising, "Pay, pay, pay." Ethan's hand shook as he reached for the knife, his body moving like it wasn't his own. The blade was heavy, cold, the rust flaking under his fingers. He saw his mom's face, her voice from years ago. "You gotta own your mistakes, Ethan. Running makes it worse." But this wasn't just a mistake. This was a debt, and the bus wanted blood. He held the knife, his breath ragged, the passengers' chants pounding in his head. The woman in the scarf stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, icy and sharp, like claws. "Do it," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Hungry." Ethan's mind raced, flashing to his apartment, his mom's old photo on the fridge, the life he still had. He didn't want to die, not here, not like this. With a yell, he threw the knife, the blade clattering across the floor, skidding under a seat. The passengers screamed, a sound like glass shattering, and the bus shook, the lights exploding in sparks. Ethan fell, his hands scraping the floor, the fog rushing in, wrapping around him like ropes. The driver stood, its blank face towering over him, and the hiss became a voice, deep and final. "You choose to stay." The passengers lunged, their hands grabbing his jacket, his arms, their fingers cold, digging into his skin. Ethan kicked, thrashed, his voice raw as he screamed, "I won't do it. I won't." The bus spun, tires screeching, and Ethan saw it. The man from the crash, standing in the aisle, his face half gone, blood dripping onto the floor. "You owe me," he said, his voice a gurgle, his hand reaching for Ethan's throat. Ethan swung, his fist passing through the man like smoke, and the bus tilted, throwing him against the window. The glass cracked, showing a new image, his mom, trapped in a burning car, her eyes wide, screaming his name. "No!" Ethan roared, crawling toward the door, the fog stinging his eyes. The passengers clawed at him, their nails tearing his jacket. But he kept moving, driven by one thought: get out. The driver's hiss followed, laughing now, like it knew something he didn't. Ethan reached the door, his hands slipping on the frame, and threw himself into the fog, hitting the ground hard, pain shooting through his ribs. He lay there, gasping, the fog thick around him, the bus's engine fading, like it was sinking into the night. The ground was cold, wet, not pavement but dirt, and the air smelled of ash. Ethan sat up, his body aching, and looked around. No bus, no road, just fog and silence, and in his pocket, the ticket was still there, heavier now, like it was growing. Above him, the sky was wrong, no stars, just a gray void, and somewhere, far off, he heard it, a low rumble like the bus was circling, waiting for him to stand. Ethan lay on the cold, wet dirt, his ribs screaming from the fall, the fog so thick it felt like it was choking him. The midnight bus was gone, its rumble fading into the gray void, but the ticket in his pocket burned against his thigh, heavy as a stone. He'd escaped, hadn't he? Thrown himself out the door, away from the passenger's claws, the driver's blank face, the knife that demanded his blood. But the silence around him wasn't peace, it was a trap, and the air hummed with something alive, something waiting. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps, his hands scraping the ground as he pushed himself up, every muscle begging him to stop. He couldn't. Not yet. The fog swirled, hiding the world, but he felt eyes on him. That same weight from the bus, like the night itself was watching. He staggered to his feet, his jacket torn, blood trickling from a cut on his arm where the passengers had clawed him. The ticket was still there, crumpled and warm, and when he pulled it out, the ink seemed to pulse, his name, Ethan Carter, glowing faintly, like it was alive. He wanted to tear it, burn it, but his hands wouldn't move, like the ticket was part of him now. A sound cut through the fog. A low hiss, sharp and familiar, the same one from the driver. Ethan spun, his heart pounding, but there was nothing, just gray mist and shadows. Then he saw it. A shape, tall and thin, moving through the fog, its ragged coat trailing like smoke. The collector. It was back. Or maybe it had never left, stalking him like a wolf circling a wounded deer. Ethan's legs trembled, but he forced himself to move, stumbling through the fog, his boots sinking into the soft earth. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stop, couldn't let it catch him. The hiss grew louder, closer, and Ethan's mind flashed to his mom, her voice steady even when things got bad. "You're stronger than you think," she'd said years ago when he was a kid, scared of the dark. He'd lost her to cancer 5 years back, but her words stuck, a lifeline in this nightmare. Ethan clung to them, whispering, "I'm stronger," as he ran, the fog stinging his eyes, the hiss right behind him, like it was breathing down his neck. He tripped, his hands hitting something hard. A road, cracked and old, stretching into the mist. The bus was there, waiting, its door open, headlights dim, like eyes half closed. Ethan froze, his chest tight. He hadn't escaped. The bus had let him go just to pull him back. The passengers were inside, their pale faces pressed against the windows, mouths moving, chanting something he couldn't hear. The collector stood at the door, its blank face tilted, its coat shifting like it was made of ashes. The hiss became words, slicing through his mind, pay the price or stay forever. Ethan's hands clenched, the ticket crumpling in his fist. "I said I was sorry," he shouted, his voice raw. "What more do you want?" The collector didn't answer, just stepped forward, its long arms reaching, fingers sharp as blades. Ethan backed away, his boots slipping on the road, and saw the passengers change. Their faces blurring, becoming his own, each one screaming, "You ran! You ran!" The man from the crash appeared, blood dripping from his face, his hand outstretched, gurgling, "A life for a life." Ethan's knees buckled, but he caught himself, his mom's voice louder now, cutting through the fog. "Own your mistakes, Ethan." He wasn't that scared kid anymore, the one who drove away from a crash, too weak to face it. He was here now, and he wouldn't let this thing, this bus, this collector, take him. With a yell, he tore the ticket in half, the paper ripping like skin, and threw it into the fog. A scream erupted, not his, but the collector's, a sound like metal tearing, shaking the ground. The bus roared, its engine exploding to life, and the passengers wailed, their hands clawing at the windows, cracking the glass. The collector lunged, its fingers grazing Ethan's chest, cold and sharp, like they were cutting into his soul. He swung, his fist hitting nothing but air, and ran toward the bus, not away, driven by a fire he didn't know he had. "I'm done running," he shouted, climbing aboard, the fog swirling behind him. Inside, the bus was alive, the seats twisting like vines, wrapping around his legs, thorns biting his skin. The passengers sang, a twisted nursery rhyme, their voices high and broken, like children in pain. Ethan fought, kicking free, his hands bleeding, and grabbed the knife from the floor, the one he'd thrown before. It burned in his grip, but he held it, facing the collector, now towering in the aisle, its blank face splitting, revealing a mouth, wide and black, filled with teeth. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. Not to the collector, but to the man he'd hit, to himself, to the kid he used to be. "I'll make it right." He drove the knife into the seat. Not the collector, the blade sinking deep, the bus screaming like a living thing. Light exploded, white and blinding, and the collector howled, its body dissolving into ash. The passengers' faces melting, their chants fading to silence. The bus stopped, the door hissing open, and Ethan stumbled out, collapsing onto a real road, pavement under his hands. The first light of dawn breaking through the fog. The bus was gone, the collector gone, the passengers gone. His hands were empty, no ticket, no knife, just blood and dirt. He sat there, breathing hard, the world quiet, almost normal. But as he stood, a faint hiss echoed, far off, and he knew, deep down, the bus wasn't done with him. Not yet. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, the morning light spilling through his apartment window, weak and gray, like it was afraid to touch him. 3 days had passed since he'd stumbled off the midnight bus, his hands bloodied, his jacket torn, the dawn barely breaking over a road he didn't recognize. He'd walked for hours, following the pavement until he hit Hawthorne's outskirts, the town's familiar diner glowing like a beacon. He was home, safe, but the weight of that night clung to him, heavy as fog. And the hiss of the bus still echoed in his dreams, soft and sharp, like a promise unkept. His apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made every creak sound like a footstep. The cuts on his arms were healing, scabbed over, but they itched like something was moving under his skin. His mom's photo sat on the fridge, her smile warm, steady. The only thing keeping him grounded. Ethan hadn't slept much, maybe an hour or two before the nightmares came, pale faces, black eyes, a tall figure in a smoky coat, whispering, "Pay the price." He'd wake up gasping, checking the locks, the windows, half expecting to see the bus outside, its headlights cutting through the dark. He tried to go back to normal. To his job at the insurance firm, to the routine he'd always leaned on. But the world felt different now, like he'd brought something back with him. At the diner, old-timers gave him sideways looks, their whispers trailing off when he walked by. "You okay, Ethan?" Jenny, the waitress, had asked, her eyes lingering on the bruises he couldn't hide. He'd nodded, forced a smile. But the coffee tasted like ash, and the jukebox kept playing a song he didn't know, its melody too close to the passenger's twisted nursery rhyme. Ethan spent his nights searching, digging through old newspapers at the library, looking for anything about the midnight bus. He found scraps, stories from the 1950s, a bus crash on a back road, a driver who vanished, passengers never found. Articles from the 80s, hikers gone missing, their bags left at empty stops. One clipping, yellowed and brittle, mentioned a Chuyan midnight, a bus no company claimed. Seen only by those who owed a debt. Ethan's hands shook as he read, the words blurring, his mind flashing to the ticket, the knife, the collector's blank face. He'd thrown out the jacket, burned the clothes from that night, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the bus was still out there, circling. He started driving to work, avoiding the bus stop, but every night, he heard it. A low rumble, faint, like thunder too far to see. He checked the street, heart pounding, and find nothing, just parked cars and streetlights. But the prickle on his neck never left. And shadows moved in his apartment, too quick to catch, gone when he turned on the light. One evening, he found it, a new ticket, tucked in his desk drawer, identical to the one he'd torn. His name scrawled in smudged ink, Ethan Carter, born April 3rd, 1995. No date, no destination, just a faint stain, like blood. Ethan's breath stopped, his hands shaking as he held it, the paper warm, like it was breathing. He hadn't kept it, hadn't seen it since that night, but here it was, real and heavy. He burned it in the sink, watching the flames eat the paper, the smoke curling like fog. But the hiss came again, soft, from nowhere, whispering, "You can't run." Ethan went looking for the man he'd hit 10 years ago. The one he'd left bleeding in the rain. The library had old records, and he found a name, Mark Reynolds, a mechanic, hospitalized after a hit and run, alive but with a limp that never went away. Ethan wrote a letter, his hands shaking, spilling out the truth. "I was the one who hit you. I was scared, and I ran. I'm sorry." He didn't send it. Not yet, but kept it in his pocket, next to his mom's old cross necklace, like a weight he had to carry. The nightmares got worse, the passengers' faces clearer now, their voices louder, chanting, "He knows, he knows." Ethan saw the collector in the corner of his eye, standing at the edge of the parking lot, in the reflection of his bathroom mirror, always just out of reach. He stopped going out after dark, kept the lights on, but the rumble came closer. Every night, like the bus was counting down. Tonight, he sat by the window, the letter in his hand, the cross necklace cold against his chest. The town was quiet, the street empty. But Ethan felt it, the prickle, stronger now, like a hand on his spine. He stood slow and looked outside. The fog was back, thick and gray, swallowing the streetlights, and there, at the corner, was the bus. Its headlights glowed, dim and yellow, the door open, waiting. The collector stood beside it, its blank face tilted, its coat moving like smoke. Ethan's heart pounded. His hands fumbling for the letter, the necklace, anything to hold onto. The hiss filled his head, soft and final, like a door closing. The next stop is yours. He backed away, locking the door. His breath ragged, but the rumble grew louder, the bus's engine shaking the walls. Shadows moved in the fog, pale faces pressing against his window, their black eyes unblinking. Their mouths forming one word: pay. He clutched the letter, his mom's voice echoing, "Own your mistakes." Ethan knew he'd never be free, not until he faced it. Mark, the truth, the bus. But as the knocking started, slow and heavy, not on the window but on his door, he realized the bus didn't want his truth. It wanted him. And in the fog, the collector waited. Its blank face splitting into a smile, promising a ride that would never end.